Da 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 bomb. Hello, friends. Hi, I'm Elizabeth, and I read stuff. I am very, very happy to be here. Video number one. I just thought I would casually join the BookTube community, as one does, right? And I love talking about books. I've always been an avid reader. I love discussing what I'm currently reading right now with my friends, and I thought, why not join the community and create a channel that actually discusses those things and talks about those things. And I will say too that I tend to be someone who loves a lot of different genres. So I tend to like romance and fantasy, and it's slightly controversial younger sibling romantasy, which I love, by the way. I love romantasy in this house, so it's okay. But yeah, personal growth and development books, mystery, thriller, horror, pretty much anything that you can think of, except for like a few different genres like historical stuff, which is just so dry for me. I can't do it. I do like everything. So I'm super excited to meet you guys and to be here, but figure in this first... Hello. She's loud. My chair is going up against here. One second while I'm here, just a quick coffee break. Uh-huh. So good. Okay. Love it. We love this. So, squeaky chair, pay no mind. It's fine. It adds to the experience. That's what you need to tell yourself. It's okay. So I figured this first video, we can get into the top 10 books that I read for 2024. Maybe in a future video, I can go through absolutely every single book that I read last year, kind of tier rank them for you guys, see where my tastes align with you, hopefully give you some new recommendations to add to your shelves, tell you which books to steer away from. I never want to say books that you shouldn't waste your time on, because there's always an author somewhere who spent precious hours crafting those books that we read that we don't enjoy, but sometimes it's kind of true, you know? So anyway, I have my handy dandy list here of my top 10 books, and these are in absolutely no particular order. I don't know why I just did this. This is kind of no particular order. This is going to be just any old order that I want them to be in. So let's go ahead and get started. So in number 10, the 10th spot, I don't know. We have the Fireborn trilogy by Rosario Munda. Yes. And this was a shocker to me. First of all, I started reading this book series right after Christmas, and I'm only still partway through the third book of I think the trilogy is called the Aurelian Cycle. But wow. Like, it just really packs a punch. It gets in there. And this is a YA fantasy with political thriller and, mystery elements, I would say, thrown in. It is really good. I feel that politics sometimes can fall flat in my fantasy, in my experience anyway, and sometimes it feels very dry to me, and I just really skip over all of the politics stuff in the books that I'm reading, fantasy in the fantasy world. But for some reason, Rosario writes the politics in this series in such a digestible, easy to understand way. You understand the stakes, you understand how it impacts society, the culture, you question the future, you're really pulled into the story, and she does the political and backstory world building elements in such a great way through dialogue and through action, so that you don't feel like you're getting info dumped, you don't feel that it's really dry material that you're just kind of slogging through, which is kind of the best thing that I love about this series. So it kind of follows two main characters. It's a dual POV, except in the second book we get a third POV added, but the first book deals with two main characters, Annie and Lee, and they're essentially two people at this like academy, and there's dragons involved. It's kind of, I think it's been pitched as being similar to Fourth Wing, except it's done a little bit, I hate to say better, but kind of better. You know what I mean? And so they're at this kind of academy riding their dragons, and they are training to be the frontline militia for this society that they're in, right? So it's super good. Really love the character development in both of these characters. Annie, I absolutely love her. She's amazing. And then her friends are so cute too. There's this character, Duck. He is like the sweetest boy, the most beautiful cinnamon roll child that ever was. I say child, but I think in the book he's the same age as the rest of them. So he's like 16 or 17. I don't know. But anyway, it is so good. I definitely rated this 5 stars. The first book, and I would say the second book as well. Again, I'm still partway through the third book, so I really can't give a rating to it yet. We'll see how it all kind of comes together and how the author chooses to really wrap the series up, which I think can make or break my decision on that. But the first 2 books, specifically in this trilogy, I love. They were so good. Kiss. And for number 9, we have Tomorrow, Tomorrow, and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This book got me. I was in tears, but it's like one of those stories that is so beautifully written. The prose just brings you in. It's so poetic, but she also trims down the fat of the story in a way, if that makes any sense at all. How can a book be filled with beautiful prose and yet not be too flowery? I don't know, but Gabrielle Zevin does it. She's amazing. And this book literally took me on the wildest journey. It follows 2 best friends since childhood, Sam and Sadie. Sam and Sadie, yes. And they were basically, I don't want to give anything away, but they meet very, very cutely as children in a very interesting place. I think you can say this, right? It's on the book cover, is it? Let's see. No, it's not. So I won't say it. But anyway, they meet in the cutest way and very adorable. Love them. And they just form this unlikely bond, this unlikely friendship, because they both come from similar places, even though they're 2 very different people personality-wise. And as you see them grow and develop, they lose touch for a lot of different years, and then they come back together and they create this video game, which is called Ichigo, I think. And that is kind of the sensation that blows up, and suddenly they're running this company, you know, together. And that's on the book cover, so I'm not spoiling anything. It's okay. But Sam and Sadie are amazing. Marks as well. Oh my goodness. I tell you, when I say Gabrielle Zevin does these character developments in such a realistic way, I literally feel like I know these people. Like, I know Sam, I know Sadie, I know Marks, and the way that she writes them is such an achingly beautiful description of what it means to interact with different types of people, the human condition, and how different elements of our childhood can really impact us as we grow older. And Gabrielle just does such a beautiful job of making us feel what the characters are feeling. We're laughing on one page and literally crying on the next, and she does the job of describing the human condition so well. I loved this book, could not put it down. I think I read it in 3 days, and it was just absolutely beautiful. So I highly recommend that you pick this up. And number 8, we have The Last House on Needless Street by Katarina Ward. Oh my God, don't come for me. It was an amazing slow burn horror book. Yeah. I was like, is this a thriller? No, I think it is. It's a horror book. How do I describe this story without giving anything away? So it details out the perspective of a cat and the perspective of a young girl, if I'm not mistaken. And it is such a beautiful, I hate to say beautiful, it's a really well executed slow burn horror book. And I'm just going to be honest with you, I would not read what this book is about. I would go in blind with the capital B okay? Don't read anything about it unless you want to. It just gives part of the story away, in my opinion. But I will say that if you go in blind, you don't know what's happening for the first 3/4 of the book. Like, you're just reading about this cat, you're reading about this missing girl, you're like, what the heck is happening? What is going on? I think the cat is slightly religious, like the cat reads the Bible in this book. So it's just super, super fascinating when the end comes together and you realize all of the pieces that the author was putting into place for you. And I think that is such a satisfying moment when I'm reading a book, and I very rarely get to be able to do that because I feel like it's a very hard writing style to pull off, and so there's not a ton of books that do that sort of thing. But I personally love to be confused, and then boom, 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 everything falls together and you're like, whoa, like amazing, right? So I highly recommend this book. Obviously, I gave it 5 stars. It is definitely a story that I personally couldn't put down. I think I tandem read the audiobook and I was reading the physical copy at the same time. So it was just super good. Loved it. If you like slow burn horror, then this is definitely going to be the thing for you. And in number 7, we have The Drowning Woman by, I should really look at the author's names before I start talking, huh? That would be super helpful. This is by Robin Harding. This book, oh my gosh, hard turn from House on Needless Street, which is very, like I said, slow burn, slower pacing. This is very much action-packed. And when I say action-packed, I mean, there's always something happening. You're on the move. You're on the go with the main character. You're trying to survive. This character, what is her name? Lee. She finds herself kind of living out of her car and she's homeless and she's trying to survive. She's trying to figure things out. And then she meets this really interesting character, Hazel, who is this kind of wealthy, rich woman. And they kind of strike an unlikely bond, an unlikely friendship. Hazel really takes an interest in her, like very fascinated with where Lee comes from and her circumstances. And we find out through their friendship that Hazel is stuck in a very toxic, abusive marriage. And one day Hazel asks Lee to help her disappear. Like, what? What? And so it just goes from there. It's like a cluster, ton of things that happen, lots of ulterior motives, lots of trying to piece things together, what's going on, who's trying to do what. And I really thought the ending, some people don't like the ending. I personally loved it. I thought it was a really satisfying way to kind of wrap up the entire story. And it was just really well done for me. So I highly enjoyed this book. I think I read it in a day and it was super enjoyable for me to read, very fast paced. If you want a good thriller, would definitely recommend picking this one up. And number 6, we have Next to You by Hannah Bonham Young. A lot of people, I heard about this author originally because of her book Out on a Limb, which gets a lot of like rave reviews. People love it. I loved it when I read it. It was really good. But I actually found this book first before Out on a Limb. Totally unexpected. I will warn you, this is technically, I think it's the second in a series. But I read the first book and there doesn't seem to be too much of a crossover. I think there's just kind of interconnected world sort of a thing, like friends, you know what I mean? Like one story follows one friend and this one follows a different one. So totally fine to read this one out of order. But this book, Next to You, follows Lane, and she basically is having this identity crisis. She's not sure what's going on. All of her friends are partnered up in relationships, and she's just like, what am I doing with my life? And so one day she decides to do this impulsive purchase of buying a school bus so that she can renovate it and so that she can live out her best road trip days in this school bus. And she wants to kind of completely redo the inside. So she starts on this project and then she has this friend Matt, who is a mechanic, and he helps her start renovating this project that she's doing on this school bus. And the whole thing is that Matt is very much like a commitment orientated person, and Lane is not. So they start out as friends, and obviously, with this being a romance book, you can tell that it goes to something more. But I really love the way that this author writes characters. With this book, I was totally kicking my feet. I was giggling. I was screaming. I feel like this author does banter in a really great way, and I love the dynamic and the tension that she sort of put between the two characters, which I think is a little bit hard to do sometimes when you're talking about friends to lovers. Enemies to lovers, I feel like, is definitely easier to write that tension in, but I love the way that this author chose to execute the progression, the evolution of their relationship. And if you're just looking for a fun romance to read on the weekend, this is totally going to be the vibe for you. So highly recommend. It is a great pickup. At number 5, we have The Wedding People by Alison Espach. And I absolutely love this book. Oh my gosh, this was such a surprising read for me because I didn't think I would like this as much as I did. And I love it when books surprise me like this. I love the way that this author writes being alone and that feeling of loneliness. And I think that it's very hard to kind of capture certain emotions on a page, and you read them and you're like, wow, I've felt that before. You know what I mean? This feeling of like loneliness. Everybody can relate to that, right? It's part of the human condition. And I love it when a author can write it in such an accessible way. But this story follows two main characters, Phoebe, and Phoebe goes to this hotel to unalive herself one weekend. And when she is asked by this bride-to-be who's also hosting her wedding at the same hotel that weekend, you know, why she's there, if she's in the wedding party, do we know each other? Phoebe's like, no, we don't know each other. And she tells Lila, the bride, what she's there to do. And Lila's like, no, you can't do this. Like, you're going to ruin my big day. Not even in concern for Phoebe or her condition, but in the sense that she's going to ruin her wedding day. So I love this book, though, in the sense that you follow Phoebe on this journey where Lila's like, well, through certain events, Phoebe is just thrown into this wedding party, and suddenly she's at all of the wedding events. She's going through the streets of this city that she's at, and she's going sailing with these people in the wedding party. And I love this juxtaposition of coming at the beginning of the story, seeing Phoebe and the author talking about Phoebe's failed marriage and how that's created this sense of her feeling alone and isolated, not really understood by the person who's supposed to be her best friend and understand her the best. And you have that. And then on the other side, you see Phoebe kind of coming out of her shell and really getting to know this new side of her amongst this very bright, happy atmosphere. And you see at the end of the story this beautiful character arc in Phoebe, which I absolutely love, and Lila as well. I actually think that Lila is written extremely realistically in the way that you don't see this complete kind of night and day transformation from the character by the end of the story, which I think is very true to reality. But you see definite, like, significant adjustments in Lila's personality, in her capacity, I would say, for empathy and relating to other people. And the way that it ends is just so satisfying for me. I really enjoyed it, really loved this story, and highly, obviously, recommend it. 5 stars. At number 4, we have a book by Julie Soto. Julie Soto. I did not like one of her most recent books, Not Another Love Song, but I absolutely did love this previous book that she's released called Forget Me Not. Absolutely enjoyed the heck out of this book. It was so good. And this follows two main characters, Emma, who's a wedding planner, and Elliot, who is a florist. But plot twist, they're exes, and so you get thrown in the middle of them having to work on this wedding together with this background between them, with this history between them. I talked about tension earlier. The tension in this book is wild. Like, this is definitely kind of like in contemporary romance, enemies to lovers is a little bit tough to do versus fantasy where the stakes are higher and like someone's killed someone from your family and so they're your rivals now, right? But in the contemporary world, it's very tough to do enemies to lovers. But I think that Julie does a fantastic job here with what she can do in a contemporary setting. And I remember when I was listening to this book, it was completely on audiobook. I was actually traveling to Arizona at the time. And so I was literally driving through the desert as I'm listening to this story. And I'm like screaming to myself because these characters are so cute. And I was like, oh my gosh, these guys they're hot. There's some tension going on between them, and I loved it. I was here for it. I ate up every crumb, didn't leave a single one. None left. This is a little bit different from Next to You, the other romance recommendation that I have in this book. Obviously, because that one is friends to lovers, this is more enemies to lovers, but this one also does deal with a little bit more, I think, depth in her characters, which I don't know how Julie does it, but I really saw a lot more like introspection from these characters, more so than I did in Next to You, for whatever that's worth. So just a thought there. But anyway, another 5-star read for a romance. And number 3, we have The Family Game by Catherine Steadman. And this book is another twisty thriller, even more so than The Drowning Woman, dare I say. This book, wow. Oh my gosh. So this follows Harry, a budding novelist on the brink of stardom, and Edward, who is her fiance. And Edward and Harry go to Edward's family's home. And it's like this really well-kept estate. It's super fancy. Harry's never really seen anything like that. She's like, wow, this place is super nice. And you think everything's great. You think everything is awesome. They're there for the holidays. They're going to this beautiful family estate for the holidays. It's going to be great. And then things go a little bit weird. It goes a little bit strange. And so I absolutely loved this book. It was so good. I remember I started out with the audiobook and then things were just getting too crazy. And so I stopped the audiobook partway through. I was like, no. I need to go to Barnes and Nobles and I need to get a physical copy so that I can read this. Because sometimes for me, when I'm reading really intense, like action twisty things, I'm like, I have to read it. And so I went and I picked up a physical copy. I finished the book with a paperback version of this. And I stayed up into the wee hours of the night finishing this. It was so good. The ending, you just keep turning the page. I don't know how Catherine does it, but I will say the first like third of it, it is a little bit like setting up the story. You're getting into things, whatever. But after like the first 30% of this book, it's just like a domino effect. Things keep happening and you're just like, wait, what? And so anyway, I thoroughly loved the way that Catherine put this all together. I thought the pacing was really good. It didn't feel too rushed. And it also didn't feel too slow, which I feel like can be a problem sometimes in thrillers. They tend to be a little bit too slow going and it just doesn't keep my interest. And so it results in a DNF for me. But this was not the case. I definitely think this is a thriller well worth your time. I highly recommend it. All right. And number 2, we have An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. Oh my gosh. I really want to read Saba's latest book, which is All My Rage. I've heard it is absolutely amazing. But this book was actually, I'm kind of late to the game because I think this was released in like 2014, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, 2014. So, no. April 28th, 2015, first published. Okay. But I really enjoyed the high stakes of this book. I love high stakes. Cozy fantasy, I can maybe do like 2 a year. You know what I mean? Like I love cozy fantasy. This is just a side note, but I really enjoy high stakes. makes the story for me, and it keeps me turning the page, wanting to read more. I enjoy it. Say what you will. I don't know if that makes me, what do they call it, a masochist? But I mean, that's what I like in my stories. So this book, An Ember in the Ashes, I'm sure you know it because I feel like I'm the only person who hasn't read this book yet, but it is a YA fantasy about Layla, and she is a slave because she is part of this faction of society, this group in society called the Scholars, which are under martial law by this, I don't know what the other faction is called, but it's like this group at this military academy, this very militia focused group of people that kind of rule over the scholar people, and the scholar people are like peasants, the equivalent of peasants in this world. So, not Layla, Leia. I can't say the names in this video, y'all. This is embarrassing. Layla. We're gonna go with that. She's a slave. My point is that she's a slave in this world, and she meets Elias. He's like the militia academy's finest soldier. He's like the best of the best. And secretly, though, he's harboring a lot of resentment towards the way that the Empire is done. He doesn't like the injustice of it all, the hard hand of it all. And we see through Layla's eyes that she is very mistreated by this, empire. And she's serving, I think, the head. So she's a slave to the commandant of Backcliff because her brother was arrested for treason by these people, supposedly so. So there's a lot happening in the first part. You realize that this person, this girl, does not have any family left. She's forced to become a slave. Super courageous, actually, to make that type of decision because she wants to save her brother. In the course of that, she meets this rebellion, this revolt of people who say that they can help her find her brother. And they use her position as a slave within, like, kind of like on the inside in this militia military academy to the revolution's benefit. And you see throughout the whole story how Elias and Layla's, I'm going to go with it, how their storylines kind of intermingle, how they come together. The cliffhanger at the end of this book, oh my gosh, I literally got to the last page and I was like, I have to pick up the next one. I have to. So I've actually started reading the second book in the series. I'm definitely continuing through it. I'm very excited to see what's going to happen. And that is a solid YA fantasy recommendation from yours truly. And number 1, we have A Love Letter to Whiskey by Kandi Steiner. Oh my gosh, this book took my heart and it stomped on it, it ripped it apart, it put it back together again. I remember I was reading this book in public and I got to like the last, not the very end, but like right before the end, and I was just sobbing. I was sobbing in the coffee shop. And I was like, people are going to think I'm crazy just looking at me. Like, they're going to think my dog died or something. And I'm like, why is this book affecting me like it does? But I feel like the author writes these characters in such a believable way. It's very much like right person, wrong time, almost misses. It's like that sliding doors moment between these two characters. And it's so infuriating and beautiful. And it creates this rich depth to their relationship, this rich foundation that they pull from as you see them go through life together. And they'll go years without talking and then they'll come back together again and sit down and have a conversation. You know what I mean? Like, it's that type of book. And you read about how they come together and go apart. And in amongst that time, they're growing themselves as people. And you see that development in them. You see how they go through their lives. And they're not the same. This character doesn't write their interactions and their thoughts the same way when it's supposed to be 10 years in the future for these two people. Like, the author grows with the characters, and I think her writing style reflects that at each stage of their life, which I really, really appreciated. I enjoyed that because I feel like when you do a time-lapse love story, it can really feel kind of one-dimensional because the author is just writing the same type of introspective thoughts and keeping the style the very same as, you know, as if they were still 16, and it's like, wait, but they're 30 now. Like, things have changed. So I really love the way that Candy executes this book. It was super good. Really, really think that this is a solid, solid love story. It is a tearjerker, so just FYI, warning going into it, you're gonna need some tissues, okay? All right, friends, that is everything. This was so much fun. The first video, wow, it's done. I can't wait to be able to come back and make this a regular thing, make our hangouts on the reg, you know what I mean? So more to come. Very excited to be here. Love you guys. Can't wait to hear in the comments. Let me know what books you're reading, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.